Hey everyone, it's Naomi Wolf. On the first weekday, second night of Hanukkah, first weekday after an attack on a Hanukkah celebration on Bondi Beach in Australia, near Sydney, a beautiful beach, a place that I've been, absolutely blessed, heavenly landscape, gorgeous context. So ironic that so much bloodshed could unfold there. And I've written this essay called Hanukkah on a Battlefield to express how I felt upon reading that news. And, people are upset about it. Some people are happy about it. You can make your own decision about it, but I don't regret a thing I said. I stand by every word, and I'll just share it with you, and we can talk about it. But part of what I feel I'm doing here, and I didn't ever mean to, is just kind of explaining who we are. I'm literally reading through the Torah in Hebrew from beginning to end, translating it into English with a good translation, the Geneva Bible, showing you where the mistranslations came in and later translations. That's such a crazy undertaking unless you realize that, there's horrible misconceptions which affect everyone, not just Jews, about what the Torah is, what Jesus, who Jesus comes from, what the context was in first century Judea, what Jesus was explaining, who Jews are, what they believe. Like, no one reads the Torah practically. So that's part of what I feel I need to do. And also, I guess I find myself kind of just explaining basic Judaism, to people who understandably may have never met a Jew, may have never celebrated Hanukkah or Shabbat or Purim or any celebration of ours. It's such a horrible, dangerous, scary time. We're all going back, we're being asked to go back to kind of a medieval context in which the major religions are at war with each other, and we've got to understand each other. So this is Hanukkah on the Battlefield, and the subtitle is The Goal, Erasing the Sacred. I've been silent for some time. I apologize. I've been unable to write for several weeks. As you know, I almost never have writer's block. So when I cannot open up my heart and speak to you, it means that something's really wrong. This morning, I woke up to a fairy tale world. We are in a little town on the North Shore of Boston, and the small apartment in which we stay when we are here faces a streetscape that has water on three sides of it. The streets are very beautiful in an austere New England sort of way. They offer the walker a landscape of cool sunlight on steel gray waves that slowly move on the sound, a setting of 2- and 3-story wooden houses, most of them built just after a devastating fire in 1914 cleared the area. Turned wooden spokes on the balconies and occasional turrets, curved steps leading up to the porches, and tall, sashed windows standing in trios in living rooms. The houses are painted the somber colors of New England, pale yellow and pale gray, gray blue, pale buff. This Puritan landscape and this subdued color palette were both so exotic to me when I first arrived on this coast as a 17-year-old from vibrant Northern California. I'm used to it now, of course, but the waters of the Atlantic still always seem to me as if I am gazing at the wrong ocean and facing in the wrong direction. If there were a god of the Atlantic, it would be a judgmental, angry, masculine god. If there were a deity of the Pacific, it would be a feminine, ever-changing, seductive, treacherous goddess. But what a world it was when I woke up this morning. The streetscape was blanketed in the whitest of snows. As if in a snow globe, flakes shook down on the houses and the streets and on Loki and me when we walked out into the wonderment of it all. Loki sniffed at the pure white powder and stepped delicately through it agog, leaving little paw prints like flowers. I was no less amazed and grateful than he. Snow flurries fell onto the steel blue bay, onto the winter dead hydrangea bushes, onto the gray sidewalks and the wet black road, turning everything into a study in white. Back home, I was excited about the evening ahead. I was planning to go to Chabad's public menorah lighting in a nearby town. I was looking forward to the latkes and dreidels that would be on offer at the gathering and to bringing home for my stepson some gelt, little chocolate coins wrapped in gilded paper. I was also planning to bake an apple pie for my stepson. We had bought the Granny Smith apples and the apple pie spices, the brown sugar and the white sugar the night before, and I had found a recipe simple enough for me to follow successfully. I was planning a cozy day in just before the Festival of Lights would begin. I felt a renewed sense of excitement about Hanukkah because Brian and I had gone to Torah study held by our local Chabad this past Thursday night. Chabad is an extraordinary organization that has changed my life and Brian's too. They welcome everybody around the world with their missions of bringing good deeds into the world and of teaching straying or secular Jews, along with their loved ones, the Torah, prayers, and commandments. And incredibly to me, as it is quite a feat to master, they teach anyone who seeks it the shelter of the law. They manage to offer basic Judaism to all who actively look for it, along with good humor, kindness, scholarship, and delicious meals and snacks. Somehow they offer all of this for free. To manage this, they manage this mission by sending shlichim, emissaries around the world to wherever they are needed. Rabbis, young and middle-aged and older, and rebbitzins, their wives, and their families. These emissaries and their equally remarkable wives go to the ends of the earth, open their homes, open their arms, and welcome all who wish to drink from the fountain of Torah. My understanding of Hanukkah this past year, as a result of my contact with Chabad, was more profound than it has been in the past. My Catholic husband and I had gone to a modest room in an industrial park for the local Chabad's Torah study. The genial, witty, learned rabbi had shared with us all historical context I had not known about the Hanukkah story and commentary from Maimonides and from other scholars about the origins of the Hanukkah festival. The education I had received about the origins of the holiday from my conservative, that is, not Orthodox Hebrew school in San Francisco when I was a child had been pretty superficial. But the real story is very deep. I knew that we were celebrating a real historical event. Hanukkah commemorates a miracle that took place after an uprising that lasted from 167 to 170 BC, led by a group called the Maccabees. The Maccabees were Jewish revolutionaries who had resisted the Seleucid Hellenistic Empire and had finally overthrown this great Syrian Greek power long enough to reclaim the Second Temple in Jerusalem, thus reestablishing an independent Jewish kingdom in the Promised Land. The Maccabees, a father, Mattatyahu, and his 5 sons had entered the Holy Temple in 164 BCE and had found it desecrated by the soldiers of Antiochus IV Epiphanes. They had found in the violated space, which was the ritual focus of all Jewish life, where Yahweh, God, was understood to have centered his presence, the holy menorah. It was without enough oil to last for more than one night. The construction of this 7-branched menorah, this pure golden candelabrum, is described in detail in Exodus 25:31-40 and Exodus 37:17-24. According to this scripture, the details of its creation, along with that of the other furnishings of the holy place within the tent of meeting, were presented to the children of Israel via Moses, by Yahweh himself. That sacred space outside the even more sacred veiled Holy of Holies included other accoutrements, other furnishings. a table for showbread, and an incense altar. The furnishings of the tent of meeting, some of which would be eventually in the temple, are these. And now I'm going to try to share my screen so you can see what I am looking at. Here we go. There's the altar of incense, the table of showbread, a bronze basin, an altar for the burnt offering, the Ark of the Covenant, and this golden lampstand, which literally exactly foreshadows what I'm holding in my hands. And now I will stop sharing if I can. There we go. This whole structure, God's dwelling in essence, had been mobile when the children of Israel had wandered in the desert, before Yahweh allowed, at least according to our sacred texts, their descendants to enter into and to possess the Holy Land. Once the children of Israel inhabited their own kingdom, these furnishings became part of the centerpiece of the first temple, which had been constructed by King Solomon on Mount Moriah in Jerusalem in about 960 BC. The first temple stood for about 400 years till it was destroyed by the Babylonians in about 587, 586 BC. Then the children of Israel were taken as captives to Babylon, their temple razed to the ground, and the Holy Land laid waste. The second temple was built in 516 BC, when the great Persian king Cyrus conquered Babylon, and he allowed the captive Jews to return to the Holy Land. There they, and I hope you're noticing as I'm telling this story with this timeline, there was kingdom after kingdom of Israelites in the land of Israel, like for hundreds of years. I'm not saying that means that the state of Israel has impunity. I'm just saying we've been there for thousands of years, you know, with kingdoms, with political kingdoms, with religious kingdoms, with structures, with civilizations. It's like saying Iranians have no right to Iran. I mean, ancient, or, you know, Indians have no right to India. Ancient civilizations that have been there continually. There's no question about it. And that may be why I'm getting so much hostility now, just telling this story, or just, you know, reading the 5 books of Moses that tell the story, because, you know, we are told to go in. You can say that God doesn't exist and that we're all hallucinating it. Then we go take up residence in the land of Israel around 3400 BCE. And then we're there for centuries and centuries and millennia with disruptions like the Babylonian exile, but still a remnant was in the Holy Land right up until the present moment. So settler colonialism is just nonsense. I'm not saying just because you have an ancient presence in the land, you have political impunity, but you know, powerful interests do not want anyone to know this timeline. And by the way, this timeline is your timeline, Christians, right? It's your timeline. It's also your timeline, Muslims, because the Abrahamic religions descend from this scripture and from Abraham, right? You know, this is his family, his descendants. But this is the origin story of Jesus's sojourn on earth. Right. And the ancestry of Christianity itself. And anyone who says otherwise is an ignorant person and needs to read a book. And I'm trying to keep this all G-rated. And he allowed the captive Jews to return to the Holy Land. There they rebuilt the temple. It stood in the great King Herod's reign, 72 to 4 BC and beyond. Herod the Great is the king in the story of Christmas, which is coming up, who reportedly heard from the Magi of a baby born in Bethlehem who would become, quote, king of the Jews. He thus was responsible, at least in Matthew's gospel, for the murder of baby boys and of boys under the age of 2 that were born in that area, the massacre of the innocents. His son, Herod Antipas, was the client king of Galilee who oversaw, along with Roman governor of Judea Pontius Pilate, the execution by crucifixion of Jesus of Nazareth at 33 years old. I'm so sorry. Let us stop that right there. Of Jesus of Nazareth at 33 years old. Both of the Herods were client kings. Thus, they were completely overseen by, and Tucker Carlson, now I'm talking to you, and at the mercy of all of the power of the Roman Empire, which was governed during Jesus's lifetime by Emperor Augustus Caesar and then by Tiberius Caesar. The Roman Pontius Pilate served beneath Emperor Tiberius as the governor of Judea, where Jerusalem is. The Jewish leadership in Jerusalem was thus utterly subjected to Pontius Pilate in turn. The Jewish client kings and the Jewish priestly leadership underneath them, thus, were entirely unable to govern in any capacity on any level except strictly according to Rome's will. This is something of which Tucker Carlson seems sadly ignorant when he invokes the presumably Jewish guys, quote, eating hummus, end quote, in Jerusalem, to whom he and other anti-Semites assign the full responsibility for the murder of Jesus. And here I show you Pontius Pilate and Jesus of Nazareth. And I mean, there's no clearer way to say it. I've finished reading a book called Jews versus Rome. There were 3 uprisings by the occupied Jews against Rome in 200 years, not just one. And each time the uprisings were crushed with unbelievable savagery. There is no way that the Jewish client kings or the Jewish leadership in Jesus's lifetime could have made any decision contrary to the will of Rome, and the decisions they had to make were about keeping the community alive. I mean, very much like the people who managed the ghettos during Nazi occupation, right? Jews were managing the ghettos, and they kept Jewish rebellion down during the Nazi eras in order to have a hope of letting the whole community survive. And I'm sorry, no one wants to think about this. And I'm sorry Jesus was crucified. Of course, I love Jesus. It should never have happened, but there was no way to have another disturbance, another uprising without absolutely catastrophic massacres of, you know, what turned out to be all of the Jewish people, because this did finally happen in 70 AD, a resistance by Jews, you know, much like what was being stirred up by the followers of Yeshua 66 or so years earlier. I'm sorry, more like 35 years earlier, led to the siege of Jerusalem, the destruction of the temple, and the near erasure of the Jewish people. So that's the context in which Jesus was crucified, right? That the people under the foot of the Roman Empire were aware that if there was the hint of rebellion, and Yeshua, to his credit, was stirring up rebellion, resistance, right? Creating a revolutionary message. All Jews would be massacred, exiled, enslaved, their wives and children enslaved, shipped off to Rome in chains, and, you know, the temple destroyed, nothing left. And that's what happened. That's what happened. So Tucker Carlson, please read a book. And I'm sorry to be like personal, but it's so shocking to me what ignorance of history is doing to otherwise intelligent people. And, you know, Tucker Carlson is someone whom I really respected and liked and had a, you know, friendly set of exchanges with. He needs to read a book. All right. According to Luke 21:5, Jesus had predicted that the second temple would be razed to the ground. Quote, then as some spoke of the temple, how it was adorned with beautiful stones and donations, he said, quote, these things which you see, the days will come in which not one stone shall be left upon another that shall not be thrown down, period, end quote. So Jesus foresaw the destruction of Jerusalem, the destruction of the temple, and the near eradication of the Jewish people. And indeed it was in 70 AD, after another Jewish war, this one against Rome. Nationalist Jews had risen up against the occupying power that had so bitterly oppressed them. To punish them, legions under General Titus set siege to Jerusalem, destroying it to demoralize the enemy. Titus's forces also leveled the Second Temple. Tens of thousands of Jewish inhabitants of Jerusalem were murdered or enslaved. Titus brought the spoils of this war, including a menorah memorialized a year later in the commemorative Arch of Titus, to Rome. Josephus, the Roman Jewish historian, records his understanding that, quote, those golden vessels and instruments that were taken out of the Jewish temple, end quote, were kept in the newly built Roman temple of peace. Perhaps the menorah was among these, and I will share my screen and show you what that looks like, the Arch of Titus and the menorah commemorating the sack of Jerusalem. And Tucker Carlson, this was what the leaders of the Jewish community in Jerusalem feared, and it happened. It came to pass when they could no longer suppress the revolutionaries stirring up the Jewish people, which, to his eternal credit, Yeshua was doing in his own peaceful way. Rome did destroy everything. So, there's no justification for killing the Son of God, but to ignorantly ascribe the execution of Jesus to the Jews, it just shows such a grotesque absence of knowledge about what was actually happening historically during Jesus's lifetime. The Romans held absolute power of life and death over everyone, and they exerted it. The fears of the Jewish leadership were founded. They, when they couldn't keep order, everyone was massacred, everyone was enslaved, the country was emptied out, and the Holy Temple was razed to the ground. So, go blame the people who were to blame. Go blame Rome, okay, please. And just recognize that Yeshua himself was jeopardized by Roman tyranny at that time. He was the one who was subjugated, just like every Jew was, by Roman tyranny. And, again, just, I don't know how often to say it, like, read a book, read some history, be not ignorant. I'm sorry, it's just that Tucker Carlson's kind of cheap anti-Semitism, ignorant anti-Semitism at Charlie Kirk's memorial, which really opened the floodgates to a lot of other anti-Semitism at high places, like made it fashionable to hate the Jews again, which hasn't been, fashionable in America since like the 1920s in the South. It's so disappointing. I mean, Tucker Carlson gave me a platform to warn about the vaccine dangers when no one else would. We've had wonderful conversations. I mean, he could have picked up the phone and asked any rabbi what was happening in Judea, or any historian or biblical scholar, what was happening in Judea during Jesus's lifetime, and they would have informed him. He didn't have to use such a powerful emotional platform, or any platform, to just speak with absolute ignorance, reinvoking what really is what's called a blood libel. The canard that the Jews killed Christ on their own with no context, when it was, Rome clearly that killed Christ. They crucified people. The hills of Judea, the hills of Jerusalem were covered with crucifixes during the first century of people that Rome considered a threat or criminals. They crucified them. That's what the Romans did. And they didn't just do it to Jesus, they did it to hundreds and hundreds of Jews and others living in Jerusalem at that time. And any Roman scholar, any scholar of Jesus's context could have told Tucker Carlson that, go yell at Rome, right? Go have that conversation with the Vatican. I mean, what was Rome doing? Go have an apology from, I don't know who's left of the Roman Empire. But, it's so misplaced. It's so misplaced. Anyway, back to the essay. Many scholars believe the Arch of Titus was once painted and that the menorah depicted in it was gilded. Here is a colorized version of the scene of the arch on the Arch of Titus, created by an entity that uses colorization to visualize historic images. And you can see the menorah there. And again, it looks very much, almost exactly like this traditional menorah. So this is a memory that we have going back 3,400 years. And I will stop. Oh, wait, I didn't share that. I beg your pardon. Let me show you what I was looking at. There's the colorized version of the Arch of Titus. And I hope you can see side by side this menorah, which looks almost exactly the same as that first century frieze. Okay, I'll stop sharing now. So the golden menorah, a simulacrum of which we light tonight, is a real thing. And its sacred use in Judaism and in Proto-Judaism goes back about 3,400 years. The Jews who survived the destruction of 70 AD were exiled, just what the Jewish leaders feared in Jesus' lifetime, and scattered around the Mediterranean and North Africa. They found their way to Turkey, Cyprus, Mesopotamia, modern Iraq, and modern Iran, to Persia, Tunisia, Algeria, Morocco, and later into Europe, always fleeing attacks. So post-exilic Judaism, a record of 2,000 years of persecution in which we as a people were murdered or raped, our goods confiscated, our homes razed, our synagogues burned, and in which we were often forced to convert to Christianity or to Islam, depending on who was in power, at sword point, homeless and stateless in country after country began. That's who we are, guys. That's our story. In the absence of a temple as the centerpiece of Jewish life and sacrifice, rabbinical Judaism arose in these devastated, homesick diaspora communities around the world. It reorganized the life of this people from having centered around a building that had housed an altar and golden furnishings, as well as the scrolls on which was written the law, to centering solely on a book, the Torah, the law, and on its commentaries. Why have I gone through this Judaism 101 summary, this preamble? Because it seems that we are in a time in which almost no one knows who we are anymore. This is suddenly a time in which a spirit of nonsensical venality about Jews and about Judaism has erupted, not only across the Middle East, where pernicious lies about us have been an organizing principle of many Arab societies for the century and more since early 20th century Zionism began to return us to our ancestral homeland, but also at the highest levels of influence, leadership, and commentary in the quote-unquote enlightened West. Anti-Semitism, it seems, is the new disco. It is the new Ugg boots. Whereas till recently, expressing anti-Semitic views meant that you were boorish, ill-educated, and troglodytic, now all of a sudden, expressing anti-Semitic views seems to be a trend, a fashion. All shame has fallen away. Smart people vie to say stupid, hateful, or simply delusional things about this ancient, tortured, well-documented people. Whether it is Tucker Carlson, whose dog whistle about hummus eaters seems to have opened the floodgates, as I mentioned, or conservative podcaster Candace Owens, publicly finding it impossible to believe the historical account of Nazi Dr. Mengele's experiments, calling them, quote, propaganda, end quote, or conservative commentator Nick Fuentes torching the midterms by stating that, quote, Hitler was very effing cool, end quote, and saying in another interview, quote, I was like, Mom, Dad, Hitler was awesome, chuckles, Hitler was right, end quote. It appears that a shameless, very stupid, anti-Jewish hatred is a new edgy thing that some high-level people in the US suddenly seem to enjoy flaunting. The idiocy has been overwhelming. Quote, from the river to the sea, is idiocy, ignorant of the history of the region. The phrase, quote, settler colonialism, end quote, is idiocy. Whether you like the modern state of Israel and its policies or not, Jews are no more, quote, colonizers in the area of historical Judea than are Palestinians. From Tucker Carlson, who can't seem to be bothered to get straight who was actually governing Judea in Jesus's lifetime, on down, it seems as if no one influential these days, when it comes to my poor beleaguered people, will bother to read a history book or actually read the Torah instead of snippets of random medieval rabbinic commentary taken grossly out of context, or to take even the most cursory look at an actual map. I have a well-known independent media friend whom I have had to let go because I learned that she believes that today's Jews are fake Jews, quote, Khazarians, end quote, responsible for the evils of the world. I've had a conversation with another well-known commentator on the right who believes with no evidence that the Chabad members at 77 Eastern Parkway in Brooklyn, shown in a video clip online, had been conducting ritual sacrifices in tunnels underground. When I asked if she had ever met a Jew before or gone to a synagogue, and I offered to take her with me to one, she refused. The dabbling in anti-Jewish hatred among influencers seems to grow more addictive as the money from Qatar flows. Quote, since Donald Trump was first elected president in 2016, Qatar has spent nearly $250 million on 88 FARA-registered lobbying and public relations firms. From January 2021 to June of 2025, Qatar's agents reported 627 in-person meetings with political contacts in the US, more FARA-registered meetings than any other country in the world, period, end quote. And by the way, that source is not a tendentious or, Mossad or pro-Israel source. That is a source that simply documents FARA activity. And foreign agent registration is what FARA is. So more than any other country in the world, Qatar is funding meetings with political contacts. And I will mention that a group of right-wing influencers went to Qatar on a junket over Thanksgiving. I'm sure they were shown a beautiful time. But whatever the reinforcement for this eruption of hostility by influencers, it has been impossible not to see emergent hatred of our people and the distortion of our history that we Jews in America, at least, thought lived in the primeval past. That's why I found it hard to speak. That is why I found it hard to write to you. I've been struck with the silence of old traumas reactivated in a new context in which I had felt safe. So that brings us to Hanukkah. By 11 a.m. yesterday morning, cozy in the world of snow, the pup napping along the edge of the blue couch, his nose against the window, and I with my kitchen countertops heaped with sliced green apples, I checked the news. And then I had to sit in my maroon armchair and cry and hand the phone speechlessly to my husband. 15 dead in Bondi Beach, Australia. Jews and perhaps non-Jews too, celebrating Hanukkah on the beach, a beach I know, a beautiful, blessed place, a half moon of shoreline with sublime waves and green-topped sandy dunes mown down by two gunmen, a father and a son, as it turned out. In a video that showed 10 full minutes of these two shooting, rearming, and shooting, the cadence was almost leisurely. The police took what seemed like years to arrive. In current reports are saying the police took from 20 to 30 minutes to arrive, and they were within sight of the shooting. One armed police officer cowered behind a police car, not shooting, as the assailants kept on shooting. Fathers under fire held down their children so they would not move and attract a bullet. A young man called his mother and told her in Hebrew that he loved her. 15 are now dead and 40 are hospitalized. And I will show you the images there. There's Bondi Beach, the possessions of the people who had been on the beach. I have to also ask, how is this not a crime scene? How are, DNA and fingerprints and other, ballistics and other forms of analysis not being done on these possessions before they were cleaned up? How is this whole beach not set apart as a crime scene? I really don't understand that. And there is...
You see the man in white there running up and tackling that suspected gunman. There is a struggle, and you can see he appears to wrestle what looks like a shotgun out of that man's hands. Now, the individual in white has not at this point been identified, but local leaders are hailing what they say were extraordinary acts of personal courage by people who just jumped in at the scene. It is very likely that that man saved some lives by appearing to disarm that gunman. We know that at least 29 people were taken to hospital. Among them are 2 police officers. Authorities are saying police were on the scene and engaging in a gun battle with these shooters within just minutes. Police are also...
Fathers under fire held down their children so they would not move and attract a bullet. A young man called his mother and told her that he loved her. 15 dead, 40 hospitalized. It turned out that the Chabad assistant rabbi, Eli Schlanger, 41, a father of 5, was murdered at the Bondi Beach massacre. This was a man who had made a funny, whimsical video urging Jews to shine a light, to not be scared, to celebrate Hanukkah. Rabbi Eli Schlanger. It turns out that a 10-year-old girl was murdered. A Holocaust survivor was murdered. The bitter irony is that of all the Jewish groups to target, Chabad is the most respectful of other religions, the most gentle, the most inclusive. If those jihadi assassins had decided to leave their weapons at home and had joined Rabbi Schlanger and his fellow Chabad celebrants on the beach, they would have been welcomed with love. Quote, "We love everyone," say the Chabad rabbis, and in my experience, they mean it. The Chabad rabbis teach my Catholic husband Torah patiently with zero judgment. They teach everyone who walks in their doors. They give them cookies and prayer books and kippahs. They offer them a seat at the table. They pray with them. The Pakistani jihadi father and son, had they made another choice and joined the group on the beach, would have been given latkes and dreidels and been welcomed to join the celebration of light. All this is not random. There is a direct line from Tucker Carlson to Bondi Beach. I posted in my rage and grief that, metaphorically speaking, the anti-Semitic influencers had blood all over their hands yesterday. I mean it. Candace Owens, Nick Fuentes, Lauren Witzke, J.J. Carroll, Tucker Carlson. It seems that they thought it was fun to dabble in hatred of my people. An edgy thrill on social media, a gratifying escalation of clicks, turn into a scene of bodies bleeding out on a distant beach. And by the way, I am not calling for censorship of First Amendment protected speech. People can say whatever they want. We know that a certain kind of invocation of certain tropes about Jews inevitably turns into violence, And more importantly, when powerful American voices show that they are willing to throw my people to the wolves, it signals open season on us to the rest of the world. That's how we started Hanukkah yesterday. Thanks to you influencers all, in grief with tears. It is not over. Hanukkah has just begun. Already in Amsterdam, a crowd of anti-Semites attacked a Hanukkah concert. A Jewish home with Hanukkah decorations in the window was shot at 20 times in Redlands, California. The Chabad rabbi here in this little North Shore town explained to me and to Brian that when the Maccabees arrived at the temple, there was plenty of oil, but it was impure. Only one jar was left with the priestly seal still on it, which made it pure. The miracle was that the one jar, just enough to last one night, lasted 8 nights. But he also explained that the larger meaning of the quote oil was what it symbolized. The Syrio-Greeks occupying the Holy Land had forbidden Jews to circumcise baby boys, to sacrifice or study Torah, and to celebrate new moon festivals, three key elements of Judaic ritual. The Greeks wanted to keep the Jews alive. They thought them useful. They did not want to wipe them out physically. And the Greeks also wanted to keep the Torah, which they valued, but only as a work of philosophy. The Syrian Greek occupiers did not want the Jews to remember that they had a spark of the divine in them, as all people do in Jewish thought, or to remember that the Torah was the word of God. They wanted to leave the Jews the impure oil so as to get them used to using impure materials, the rabbi explained, to erase the sacred. Generally, the Syrian Greeks wanted to keep the structures of society and institutions in the Holy Land intact, but to erase the sacred. That description was so profound, it seemed to me. We are in a time now again in which powerful people want to keep the forms of this or that religion or philosophy or building or practice or ritual or holiday, but to erase the sacred. It did not work then. It won't work now. We are not going anywhere. We will remember and we will defend the sacred. And if that makes you hate us, so be it. The sacred oil, the festival light, is for everyone. That has always been essentially our message. If you destroy us, if you slander us, if you murder us, you still cannot kill this off. You only debase the sacred in yourself. That is my essay, and I will show you the last image, which is this image of last night, the first night of Hanukkah. All right, thank you for listening. Let's hear from all of you. Gosh, lots of, lots of horrible comments. Lloyd Brown 6026 said Rob Reiner and his wife found dead this morning. I'm aware of that. I don't know what to make of it. But I'm still talking to you guys, so I'm sure we'll find out more as time goes on. But it's a scary time. It's a scary time to be a public figure. It's a scary time to be a Jewish public figure. Gary von Arsdale says, many people are posting and providing evidence that this was a fabricated event, a false flag, if you will. And you're asking, here, let me share your comment. Wasn't Naomi one of the first people in the public eye to tell us about Building 7 and the false flag of 9/11? No, I was not. I still don't know what happened with 9/11, except that there are tons of anomalies. But I've never claimed to know what happened. I've been very careful to never say that I knew what happened with 9/11. To this day, I don't know. And, if you've got evidence that it's a false flag on Bondi Beach, please share it. If you don't, don't say that until you have evidence. I mean, honestly, that's really irresponsible unless you have confirmed objective evidence. No one died. There were no shooters. It was all fake. Please show me. That's a very big claim. And I just think it's notable that so many people are saying this at a time when there's really a war of ideas and really kind of a war of influencers, a war of influence between Jewish entities and Israel on the one hand, and Qatar and is jihadi entities and globalist entities aligned with them on the other. That's where we are right now. So connect the dots, please wake up. Fine. You guys know I'm always open to evidence. If I'm upset because of an imaginary thing that happened, pure theater on Bondi Beach yesterday, show me. David Richards, a lot of people saying false flag. Dave Richards, show me, post it. You've got evidence? Post it in the chat. Let's see it. Let's examine it. But, if if 15 Christians worshiping Jesus were mowed down for their religion on a beach, allegedly, and if I dared to say that's all imaginary, that's theater, that's fake, I would bring some evidence. Otherwise, what is this but hatred with no evidence? What is this but propaganda with no evidence? Bring it. And here we have someone vomiting, and a vomit symbol and a clown symbol. So no refutation, no argument, no debate, just barfy symbols. Thanks for elevating the discussion. And Freak says, when is the temple going up in Jerusalem? So I know that you all may not recognize that as a kind of confrontational comment, but I'm just going to challenge at this point every single anti-Semitic premise, because I'm so done with all of it. Honestly, I'm done with all of it. What is on the Temple Mount right now? Seriously, you guys, let's have some intelligence. I don't know why I'm trying to elevate this conversation to a fact-based level, but I'm going to insist on it. Let's think for a minute, everyone. What's on the Temple Mount right now? Google it, okay? On the Temple Mount right now, the most sacred place in 5,000 years of Jewish practice is Al-Aqsa Mosque, which was built on the ruins of the Second Temple. And in fact, the Wailing Wall, or the Western Wall, where you often see, Jews and notaries, dignitaries visiting, praying, putting notes in the cracks, that very revered holy place in the old city, that is the last remaining retaining wall of Herod the Great's massive construction project, adding to the Jewish temple before, the generation a generation later, when all of that would be razed to the ground. 2 generations later, technically, on 70 AD. So they built a temple, and it's sacred to them, and Jews are not allowed to set foot. Christians are not allowed to set foot on Al-Aqsa, only Muslims. No one holds that against them. And you kind of shouldn't. It's their it's their religion. They built it. It's in East Jerusalem now. It's Palestine. Go bless you. Go worship Allah on Al-Aqsa. But why shouldn't Jews rebuild the temple if they want to build a temple to God? I mean, I've just read through Exodus, and we're halfway, nearly through Numbers. God's very clear he wants a temple built by the children of Israel. Why shouldn't we have our right to respond to that? Why do you get to say we can't do that? In our own country, no one is saying you can't build a mosque in Palestine. No one is saying don't build a mosque in Gaza. Build a mosque, God bless you. There are 50 plus Muslim countries where tens of thousands of mosques have been built. God bless you. Build all the mosques. If we want to build a temple, I am sure we will build a temple. God willing, there won't be a fight. God willing, there won't be an insistence that it be built kind of on the ruins of Al-Aqsa, God forbid, right? Because that is a sacred place. But honestly, a difference between Israelis, I'm so done kind of apologizing, and everyone else is Jewish places of worship are not kept sacred in Muslim countries. There used to be thousands of synagogues all over the Arab world. They got emptied out in the 1940s and 1950s when Jews in the Muslim world were ejected, their businesses and homes confiscated, their temples cleared out, and they had to immigrate to Israel, traumatized, right? From countries like Iraq, Iran, Morocco, North Africa, where they'd been living for centuries, since the exile, centuries and centuries, millennia. But Jewish sacred sites are not protected in the Muslim world. They should be. Christian sacred sites should be protected in the Muslim world, but no one bothers Al-Aqsa. And when crazy people, which has happened, transgress on Al-Aqsa, they are, taken down by the IDF and other people, as they should be. Muslim holy sites are protected. The Church of the Sepulchre is protected. in the Holy Land. And, it's a contrast. All sacred sites should be protected by the host countries. They should be. And isn't there a portion of the Temple Mount where the temple could be built? I don't know. I'm not a rabbinical scholar. I'm not an archaeological scholar. I don't think God's that fussy, honestly. If they wanted to rebuild it, in the plaza, which has one wall left from the original temple, I'm sure God would be fine with that. But the rest of the world wouldn't be fine with it, right? Because we're not allowed. Everyone else is allowed, and we're not allowed to worship our God in our way, in our country. And I'm just so tired of it. Okay, so lots of abuse. Just fuck off with your temple bullshit. So again, why isn't Al-Aqsa temple bullshit? And it's not. It's a holy place. Why can and should Muslims around the world, as they should, keep an image? You've walked into these, barbershops and falafel shops where there's a beautiful photograph of Jerusalem with Al-Aqsa, the holy mosque, with a golden dome, beautiful structure. It's sacred, right? Muslims remember it as they should, right? It is a holy place. It has meaning in the Quran. Why aren't you saying fuck off with his temple shit? Why are you saying it to me and not to them? If they have a right to worship, and they do, we also have a right to worship. And Melanie McPhee said, okay, these are friendly people. Let me encourage you, because my community is a thoughtful and civil community. If you're going to be part of this discussion, I need you to not use obscenity and not use personal slurs. Just bring your thoughts, your arguments, respectfully expressed, and your evidence. Okay, I'm still waiting. Okay, let's see. Do I consider Israel a colonizing entity? No, that's not what I was trying to show. Lily 11799, well, what does that mean to colonize, right? Israel's been there for millennia, as you see from the history I just read to you. So, and it was partitioned, again, read some books, by the British mandate in 1948. A section, not all of the Holy Land in the Bible by any means, was assigned by the British Empire to Israelis, to Jews, who named it the State of Israel. And a section, including some beautiful, fertile, valuable parts of the country, and others that were not so valuable or fertile, were assigned to Palestinians, and they were welcomed to name it Palestine. Then a war ensued. Okay, so are you going to, they were treated in exactly identical ways. That the land was carved up, just like India and Pakistan. And yes, a horrible war followed the partition of India and Pakistan, but no one says the Indians are colonizers. No one says the Pakistanis are colonizers. Israelis, Jews are not colonizers, and Palestinians are not colonizers. Let's not forget that, the Holocaust then made Europe unlivable for Jews who had been living there for centuries, in Poland, in, what's now Czechoslovakia, in Germany, in Austria. And they had, if they survived, no one would take them and they had to, go somewhere. And so the international community welcomed those refugees to Israel, to the new state of Israel, or to what became the state of Israel. And the same thing happened to Palestinians. They became, they had refugee status. And over, Palestinians have been offered their own nation, and they've rejected it. So, I love the people, the Palestinian people that I've met. They're extraordinary people. They've endured so much. It is time to make peace and build our nation side by side, and build businesses together, and build educational institutions together, and build social networks together. It's time for both sides to live in peace. And no, historically, Jews are not colonizers in the land of Israel, any more than Palestinians are. I'm sure you can trace the families of many Palestinians back many generations. There have always been native people there, even before the children of Israel moved in, like the Amorites and the Midianites and the Amalekites are more original than, the ancestors of current Palestinians. What became of those people? Who knows? But that's the nature of history, like America colonized the colonies, then Britain colonized the colonies, then there was a war for independence, then there's the nation of America. There's no country that isn't on the ruins of another country or civilization, and I'm just done apologizing for it. Let's see. Groyper's in the chat. I don't even know what that word means. Loki, come on. Okay, you guys. I think we have read a lot of the comments, and I'm going to end with that because it's so nice. Loki, you can sit on my lap, sweetheart. I hope this has been helpful. We've got a lot of listeners. Thank you so much for tuning in. I hope you understand where I'm coming from. I try to always be like, kumbaya, let's hold hands, let's join together. But these are really horrible times. And I'm not going to lie to you all. These are horrible times. Very hostile, scary people want us on many sides, right? Want us to go back to a medieval reality in which Muslims fought Christians, Christians fought Jews, Christians fought Muslims. It's bad, you guys. We've moved past that. Let's not do that. So I really call upon moderate Muslims, of whom there are many millions, to speak out. It's a really good time to speak out. I'm not hearing a lot of moderate Muslim voices joining forces with Jews right now in the wake of 9/11, when the Bush administration was whipping up anti-Muslim hatred. I went to services at my local mosque. I covered my hair. I joined in solidarity with my Muslim neighbors and friends. And I wanted to show, that we could live in peace and that I wasn't buying the anti-Islam broad brush. Now is a time when Islam is being weaponized in a very cynical way by globalist interests, and not moderate Islam, but like literally tribal people from rural parts of Afghanistan and Pakistan, people who, treat women like cattle and traffic girls. I mean, horribly backward people who do not represent moderate Islam or millions of Muslims. They're being kind of hurled into the West to foment civil war, clearly to be a replacement population, and to engage in acts of violence against Jews, to fracture the Christian-Jewish alliance among conservatives and independents in America, for sure. And right-wing Christian influencers, some of the ones I've mentioned, in my view, are falling right into the trap. So it is a time for good people of all faiths to join together to celebrate peace and light. I stand by to do it, but I just need to tell you all who we are. That was the purpose of this podcast. Now, and by the way, I'm very honored that this podcast is in the top, 100 to 200 podcasts in places like Nigeria and the Republic of Congo and Russia and so on. And so it's, the word is getting out there, and I'm just looking for how I thank my sponsor for this podcast, who is American Alternative Assets. And I appreciate them, and I hope that they thrive. So American Alternative Assets is a highly respected company that can turn your retirement account into gold, or part of it into gold and precious metals. There have been multiple times in recent history when there have been warning signals about the economy, the same way that happened before the Great Depression. We saw this in 2008 when a bubble crashed, and there are similar red lights flashing now about the economy. Certainly all this instability in the world. China's buying gold reserves, and The price of gold, has nearly quintupled in 5 years. If Brian and I had bought gold when we first started talking about it 5 years ago, we would have literally quintupled our investment. So yesterday is when we need to have bought gold and precious metals. It's also, as central bank digital currency continues to be a concern, and in Europe, the central bank digital currencies are definitely consolidating their forces. It's more reason than ever to convert, at least some of your assets into precious metals. Precious metals like gold and silver always survive instability, collapse, chaos. They just accrue value over time, compared with other kinds of assets, which can face sharp corrections or being frozen, like people's bank accounts around the world are being frozen. Israelis' bank accounts in Spain were frozen. The truckers in Canada, their bank accounts were frozen. These people haven't gone away, the ones who freeze people's bank accounts for political reasons. So all the more reason to diversify some of your assets into gold and precious metals. So go to cloutgold.com, CLOUTGOLD.com, mention Outspoken Daily Clout, and get a free report called the Bellwether Report that will teach you about what the warning signals are right now in the economy that make it imperative, really, for you to protect some or all of your assets in precious metals. And you can go ahead and call American Alternative Assets as well, cloutgold.com. And remember, when you support our sponsors, you support us. And this kind of independent journalism. Let me know your thoughts. Let's keep having this conversation. Thank you for listening. You can find me over on Outspoken, on Substack. You can support us over at dailyclout.io. When you subscribe or donate, especially with the end of the year coming up, it helps us get you real conversation, real evidence, real reporting, as well as tools to stop bad bills or promote good bills. You can legislate from your phone, which is something no one else offers you in independent media, over on BillCam and Legisector. Thank you. Happy Hanukkah, and I will talk to you tomorrow. Take care. Bye.